Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is episode 147 and is our practice edition where we talk about lean improvements made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda.
And I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision. And the quote this week, "Don't water your weeds," from Harvey McKay.
Yeah. Always a good
Enough
reminder.
said.
Yeah, basically. I don't know, I think it's interesting. I feel like when we're making improvements in our shop, we sort of go through these big, not dips, but where nothing really significant is getting improved. And obviously, well, I guess what I was going to say is nothing really significant gets improved. And then suddenly I feel like there's these big spikes where we're really tackling the big, sort of more systemic problems in the shop. And I don't know if that's because sometimes we're sort of refining our waste, and then other times we're really cutting down on waste, or if it's sort of like we've talked about reducing the noise level with some of those more basic improvements that then sort of expose those bigger things.
Mhm.
I don't know, but either way, yeah, definitely have watered my weeds.
Yeah, I think it points to also having a clear method for identifying what to improve, because it's very easy to water one's weeds when you don't really know what's a weed and what's not.
Right.
I realized we're deep down this like metaphorical hole without ever having sort of explained how we think about it. Some people might be like, "Weeds? You guys garden?" I have no idea what you're talking about. Um, but yeah. So on that note, we had a little meetup last week.
Yeah.
Local area machinists, and we did as part of the like, not just like shoot the breeze and drink beer, but as part of the let's have a real conversation part, we did a group A3 of one shop's kind of struggle or bottleneck, what they identified as a bottleneck. um, and it really just drove home how effective that process is at identifying what is a weed and what is not. And we still don't do that process like explicitly in our shop as much as
Yeah.
probably would be beneficial, but it has really, just doing it even a handful of times has really like strengthened that muscle
Mm-hmm.
of being able to point yourself towards identification of what the actual sort of problem and root cause is. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it was a really fun process to go through for sure. And every time we've done it, it's been really insightful for us.
Yeah.
We don't, same as you, I think, kind of don't do them habitually yet. But it does sink in every time we do it, how powerful they are. Which seems really silly because it's like 5 little questions, but then you spend
Uh-huh.
an hour and a half easily because it's actually really difficult to answer those questions properly.
Mm.
I really like the one detail you mentioned, which maybe I've just forgotten about or curious where you heard about it, where if so people not familiar with A3, it's a set of questions. I think it's like five, or maybe six.
Yeah. I'll
And
read it.
and I really like the detail about if the countermeasures are sort of, or was it the countermeasures are too broad, you sort of plug those back in, or if the
No, if you can't identify the root cause
mm,
analysis in less than five, or sorry, if you can't identify the root cause in 5 questions.
then you loop it back and put that in as the top,
Mm-hmm.
or each one of those
Um,
guessed root causes.
Guessed root causes.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
like the
Uh,
things you're sort of listing. Anyway,
yeah.
that was really useful and actually applied really well to the one we did as a group, I thought,
Mm-hmm.
because it was very clear once you said that that's sort of what we were struggling with as a group, was like there was this really high level, and essentially the problem was raised that there was a lot of downtime on the spindles while people were programming new jobs. And so there was this sort of imbalance between the jobs, um, in the jobs between the programming hours and the spindle hours. And it just felt like there was a lot of uh, potentially profit opportunity, which I think a lot of machine shops can relate to in those
Hmm.
in that downtime. Um, and for example, just saying like, well, the root cause is that your programming is too slow. Like you can do a full A3 on why is our programming too slow.
Yeah.
And so it really didn't make sense to be operating at that level.
Yeah.
But even so, it was really interesting to find because it kind of came down to two, right? It was like
Hmm.
accept work that had a different balance or change the speed of your programming.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, the questions, 7 questions. At least I've seen a bunch of different templates online. The one that we've kind of
yeah,
settled on and like is the first question is, what is your problem? What is the background of the situation? So this is like, just be like the quick word description of like what you're dealing with. And then, so if it was like, we want to move more product through the shop or low spindle hours or something, then the second question is, what is the current condition? So this is describing the current state without value judgments. So, and it's not in relation to the future state or the past state. So you're not saying like, this is what I want, but this is what I would like. You're just saying, this is what's happening. And ideally that has some degree of quantifiable description. So like we're doing this many hours programming versus this many hours spindle runtime.
right. Versus just like idle spindles frequently.
Yeah. So like trying to drill into like exactly what is happening right now. And then the target condition is the next question. And so that's basically from that foundation that you've just established as your current condition, where do you want to end up? Again, no
And
value judgments, not what were you going to say?
do you know with that target condition, should it be like where you want to end up eventually, or is it more like in this PDCA loop?
My understanding is it's where you want to end up in this PDCA loop.
Okay, so if you wanted more spindle utilization, you wouldn't be like zero downtime as your target condition. You would say like let's
No.
improve it by 10% or 20% or
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. And then the next question is, what is your root cause? So this is root cause analysis, trying to figure out what, or postulating, theorizing what the root cause is that is causing the discrepancy between your current condition and your target condition.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is countermeasures. So this is where almost everybody just jumps to immediately. But this is one of the final steps, which is what are things that we can do to bring the current condition and the target condition closer together. And then the other one after that is effect. So not just will this bring the current condition and the target condition closer together, but how do we anticipate that happening? Like specifically, what will be the effect of the countermeasure? So it might be in the programming time versus runtime scenario. It might be like we anticipate that with templating, we're going to reduce our average programming time per part by 10% or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last question, which is important, is follow up. And in the Toyota Kata book, they always kind of describe this as like, when can we go and see
Yeah.
if this worked or not and how? So having some idea of like what's the time horizon, I guess, on the improvement that you're making, not just like this would be a cool thing, let's work on it and we'll hope, cross our fingers that it functions, but like, can we test this today? Can we test this week? And can we see a result? And I
Yeah.
think oftentimes, similar to having the root cause be undefinable and needing to drill in on that deeper for like a smaller chunk of the
Yeah.
problem. I think similarly, when your follow up is like 6 months, a year out, you probably are working on a problem that's too broad and you need to break it down into smaller pieces of it.
Yeah, I think there's that aspect. I think the other piece that I've seen, I think in bigger organizations, um, is it really de-emphasizes like whose idea a thing is and really
Yeah.
moves the focus squarely onto like what's going to be effective. Because
Yeah.
if people know it's going to go get measured,
Yeah.
it's like, well, we better pick the right thing. And
Don't pick
suddenly,
mine.
yeah, and being like the smartest, best articulated person, who's like you get picked because you can convince everyone that you're right.
Hmm.
It's like it doesn't matter what anyone thinks, just how are we going to
Yeah.
go measure it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, I think that's really helpful, and kind of moves things, yeah, away from sort of like a ego trip of like, well, that's silly. I don't think that'll work because of whatever, whatever. We've all been there, like in brainstorming sessions where it becomes more about like who can convince, yeah,
Yeah.
the group
Yeah,
that that's the right direction.
for sure. On that note, I have kind of the one sort of big improvement of the last couple weeks. Um, the background of the scenario is we've spent a lot of time for the last year refining our setup
Mm-hmm.
process, and I think considering the work that we do, it definitely could be better, but it's pretty dang good in
Mm-hmm.
terms of our changeover time from job to job. In terms of changing out tools, changing out work holding, doing all of the repetitive things that happen for every changeover, for every
Right.
part. However, we still have a pretty long delay of from when a part ends running to when the next good part is made
Mm.
and we're effectively in production on the next part, whether that be quantity one or quantity 200.
Yeah.
And so we don't have any real direction yet, but in order to establish the current state, we got stopwatches for each
Okay.
of our machines,
Mm.
and we're just going to start measuring what that time is and what percentage of that time is setup and what percentage of that time is proof out, idle. Actually, we're not measuring. We started by not measuring from when a part ends to when a next good part is made. We're starting it from when you start the setup process to when a good part is made,
Mm.
because it felt a little, as much as I would like to tackle that whole chunk of time, it felt a little bit like there were too many, that's just introducing too many variables to the system.
Right. And hunting that down,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be an interesting A3 in and of itself, just that chunk.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I do think is important because in all of the things I've read, there's so many instances where like a huge improvement in terms of like production capability comes down to some like silly scheduling quirk, where they're like,
Mm.
oh,
Totally.
actually, if you just like move this person, if you just switch these two people's like sequence, all of a sudden you free up 50% capacity. So I think
I'm,
there is definitely like, there's a reason to look at that chunk of time between when a part ends on a job and when the setup begins. But at the moment, I think we're just trying to tackle our proof out process and figure
mhm.
out where the friction is there, because that
Totally.
feels like approachable and
Yeah, that
discreet.
that first one feels like a go stand in the circle type of an activity, right? Like some outside person who's not in the process would sort of need to watch people and be like, "Hey, what's happening now
Hmm.
that you're not doing that other thing?"
Yeah.
Or something like, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It makes me think of the gold rat example of was it an ammunition factory where they had one big expensive machine and they were going to get another one because they needed more throughput. And there were like, I forget if it was like an hour or 2 hours of downtime every shift change because
Uh-huh.
the person had to like go change and shower, and then the new shift would come in and they'd sort of get changed and ready to work on the floor while
Mm.
the other people got on the bus. And when we went to the company to say, hey, why don't you just work through that hour? They were like, well, then we'd have to get another, the bus would have to wait or something. And he was like, pay for a taxi.
Uh-huh.
Like, for that one person, pay for the taxi.
Right,
They're like, well,
totally.
oh no, it was they needed two people, and they were like, well, they don't live in the same place or something. He was like, then pay for two taxis. It's like, again, that's your bottleneck. Like that gets you what was it? That would be like a 10%, well, a little under 10% increase.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, for the price of two taxis per day.
Right.
To
Yeah.
your point about scheduling, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much low-hanging fruit in businesses of things like that.
Oh yeah,
Again, looking at your 80% non-value add instead of your
100%.
20% value add. Um, anyway, so the improvement per se was just getting stopwatches and making a place to record that information. Um,
That's awesome, and an awesome thing to record, to like set down in this podcast about an improvement. I normally try to make sure I never put things down as an improvement of things I wanted to do or took sort of first steps at,
mm,
just things that are done. But I feel like putting that here, that is an improvement, and it is a tangible step on the like A3, and maybe that should be the delineator.
mm-hmm.
Right, like even like specifying current state,
Yeah,
right? And that's a precursor to that, but anyway, that's cool.
yeah. What you
Um,
got? What you
let's
got?
see. I'm trying to pick out one that is well, I'll just start at the top. So spend a bunch of time training ChatGPT to do like Arta comms basically,
Okay.
and started pumping out some blog posts.
Hmm.
It's a really powerful tool. Newsflash. Oh, no. It's a really powerful tool that I've noticed, like, it's finally good enough after the training to put out stuff that is pretty on point. Like, previously, I always read it and it was like a good first draft, but this feels pretty publishable and actually sort
Mm,
of clarifying. Um, I've lately felt like I'm a little bit lost in the sauce when it comes to Arda and the messaging because um, we've been operating now for a year and a half at Austere with Arda.
mm,
And so I've sort of lost sight of the baseline state.
mm.
We had so because Austere is sort of inside baseball to Arda,
Yeah.
we kind of get the whatever time is left on the team. So there was a bit of a hasty migration of our data, and so a lot of the links were lost. They were then recovered once it was
Oh,
and it was like it took a while to get it back around to it. And the result was actually kind of useful in just being able to see, um, like get back in touch with the problems businesses run into
mm,
without systemizing, because Sam kept coming over and being like, hey, like, where do we get this end mill? What is it exactly? I think I found it, but I'm not sure. And then like stuff got ordered that was the wrong item. Like it's just a lot of really basic stuff. And I feel like lately I've been like, the traveling salesman problem. And it's like, no,
uh-huh.
no, no, no one cares. And also that's the thing that's being solved. It's just like very basic, like nuts and bolts standardization.
Yeah. I think when the Arta team came by our shop, I hadn't really made this clarification in my own mind before, but like where it really comes in handy. And it seemed like what really was clarified for me is that Arta, or just Kanban in general, but like that type of inventory management is incredibly useful at sort of the two ends of the spectrum. The stuff that you absolutely use every day and need every day that are not things that you can go to the grocery store and purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So like specialties, fasteners, specialty items, specialty tooling that you use at a high rate and want to maintain a steady level of inventory. And then the other end of the spectrum is the stuff that like you use once a month and you don't use it very much, like you may go a
Yeah.
year between purchasing, but again, it's something specialty that is not easily purchasable at the store, or
Well, it's
it's an
also
out of the
non-generic.
ordinary. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a non-generic,
Yeah,
exactly.
you can't like gasoline. Anyone can go buy gasoline and it'll be
Sure.
a success.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing for me to like kind of clarify in my head. It's like,
Mm,
yes, it's helpful to have a card that you can drop off when the toilet paper is getting low so you don't run out of toilet paper. But like the failure mode of running out of toilet paper, well, obviously the failure mode of running out of toilet paper completely is not amazing. But if you're getting low, someone, everybody leaves the shop and comes back to the shop every day and can divert and pick up toilet paper.
bring a roll
Doesn't
from
matter
home.
what brand, bring a
Yeah.
roll from home,
Yeah.
whatever. Go next door and ask the neighbors, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, it's helpful there, but not critical. But those other two ends of the spectrum of like non-standard or non-generic, really important, use every day, and then non-standard, non-generic,
Right.
really important, but order once a year.
Yeah. And actually, I just one addition to that, as I think the long-term stuff you're talking about, the generic is an important factor. I think with the like constantly used items, the frequency of procuring them
Mm-hmm.
and the frequency of disrupting the team around those types of items,
Mm.
even if it is generic and you can run to the store,
Mm.
having that run to the store happen like at the right time is
Yeah.
useful to the business.
Yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, totally.
Nice.
Anyways, yes. So the, the improvement listed was training ChatGPT, and the hours spent was definitely useful.
What do you feel like was the time investment to do that process?
Um, I mean, I spent probably 2 or 3 hours doing it.
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
say, yeah.
And was it a straightforward, like intuitive thing, or were you following some
I
sort of template?
I followed like some dumb reel that I saw, which was like ask ChatGPT, like describe what you're trying to do, and then ask ChatGPT to ask you 10
Yeah.
questions to help it do that task better.
Mm.
And then I just typed out all the answers to that.
Have you noticed a big difference in the quality of, let's see, not the quality of the output, but like the quality of the service, if you will, between a paid subscription and a
Yes.
free subscription?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
may
for
need to
sure.
upgrade if I'm going to actually start using it on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I mean, the way I kind of looked at it is like, can it save, it's like 20 bucks a month or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, can it save me? Well, I don't know what you value your time at these days, but
Zero.
yeah, that's about right. Same. Yeah, will it save me infinite time per month? And no. Will it will it save me 30 minutes? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Cool. Next one. So we have a tooling mismatch between our different machines. So we have a lot of indexable or like replaceable tip, indexable tip, larger diameter drills that we use in our lathe.
mhm.
Um, yeah, machinists understand there's a difference. The way you open up holes in a lathe is very different than the way you do in a mill. And having large drills saves you a lot of headache in a lathe.
Hmm.
But it's less critical in a mill, but can still be beneficial. Anyhow, so we have a whole suite of these replaceable tip, larger diameter, like high performance drills that
Uh-huh.
we use in the lathe, but we didn't have any holders to actually use them in the mill, any tool holders.
Oh,
Because they're pretty big shanks, like 3/4 and 20 millimeter.
gotcha.
So I just ordered a couple mill tool holders to have on the shelf in case we find ourselves in that position where we want to have access to those tools.
Yeah, I was looking for the book here, but I think it's not up on the shelf yet. There's a book on tool design written in like the 60s, maybe it was, yeah, 70s. And I think like twist drills are the fastest material removal rates per horsepower.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they're unbelievably fast. if you get everything set right.
Right. That's cool. That's a good
Yeah.
one. So we did our on-site with the whole Arda team, and the improvement was actually documenting our value proposition, documenting our personas, including the economic buyer, the recommender, and the end user in each company.
Hmm.
And then that's sort of like a standard to be improved. And I think the big, like after doing it, it helps a lot of things. It's sort of documenting a generic current state in a funny way. Like
Hmm.
it is involved in most, or should be involved in most decisions. And just having everyone walking around with some idea in their head, I think we were repeating a lot of conversations
Hmm.
where now we can kind of go like, okay, who is that going to help? Like of the people we've identified, or are we missing someone that this kind of starts to illuminate?
Y-
And in doing that, I think one of the interesting things is we broke out the interactions with Arda into different personas, right? You have like your procurement person, they're going to interact with it. You have your business owner, you have your production manager, and then you sort of have this like inventory manager, which is like more nuts and bolts. Do we have what we need? Not like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, how are we running our operation? And then you have the operator. And there was some confusion about what, like some businesses, those are all one person. Some
Uh-huh.
businesses, they're split different ways. But what we decided is that splitting up the roles, even if one person uses the product in multiple capacities, it's still a separate role, and they're essentially stepping into a different role, right? Like you
Yeah.
and I in a small business are the business owners, but then also are often the operators,
Right.
right? In
Yeah,
different
that's
ways. So,
like in the E-Myth, they talk about creating
mm,
your like org profile, and you might have
right, and writing your
whatever
name in every single one
yeah,
when you
30
start.
positions under your name,
Yeah.
or your name written under a bunch of
Oh,
different
interesting.
positions, and then
I'd forgotten about that. That's really useful.
yeah. And that is so like kind of getting back to like what you were tackling here. Obviously that helps with messaging, but it probably also helps like really refine your sales funnel so you're not spinning your wheels with a lot of people who aren't a good fit. Is
Yep,
that sort of true?
for sure, for sure. And yeah, helps. I mean, there's a few parts to it. There's helping the sales, then there's helping also like customer success, like understanding who someone is,
Yeah.
and therefore kind of what they care about.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. I think we could all benefit from that process.
Yeah, it did take like 2 hours,
Sure.
which is not a long time. It's like
Yeah.
so valuable, but I feel like it's always hard to carve out like I'm just gonna work on this weird high level thing for 2 hours.
Absolutely. Speaking of sales and making sure you're a good fit, so we get a fair number of RFQs, request for quotes, where the print covers the and in manufacturing the print's kind of like the word of God, kind of, right? Like that is the final point of truth for
Sort of
any.
the contract.
Yeah,
Did
sort
you
of.
make this?
Yeah, exactly. And so we're getting a lot of RFQs where the print covers like final assembled state, including all these finishes, like precision cleaning requirements,
Mm.
stuff that's outside of our scope.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes in the request, it's not clear. Like they're requesting us to manufacture parts of this print. It's not clear exactly where the line is drawn on where we are going to finish
Fascinating.
and they will pick up. Um, and in my haste, sometimes I forget to define that in our quotes.
Okay.
So I added just a generic quote language template that
Mm.
I can copy and paste in. Like here's a classic one too that it has nothing to do with people's prints, but is a very common source of confusion. Our quotes output lead time in business days,
Okay.
but it doesn't say business days. Like if you're on the digital
Oh.
quote and you like hover over it, it will say business days,
Mm.
but it just says days. And so part of the generic quote language is like, this lead time is business days after receipt of order. And like it's in the fine print as well, at the like the generic fine print at the bottom of
Yeah.
the quote, but like putting this in at every part. This is the lead time for this is this many business days after receipt of order. That's part of it. Just trying to kind of like streamline some of that stuff. So A, I don't forget, and B, our customers aren't frustrated when
Mm-hmm.
we don't meet their expectations,
Right.
because our comprehension of the situation was different than
Right.
theirs.
Yeah.
And
That's
we're both sort of right. And that's always the challenge, is when you're like, you're right, you did read 15 days and I also read 15 days and we interpreted what that means
right.
differently, and now we're both frustrated.
That's a good
So
one.
yeah, small but helpful.
Um, so I think I talked about this last episode, but we built a merch station with the Arda team.
Yep.
And so that was just setting up essentially giving them the full customer experience. Here's a blank version of Arda. Here's a bunch of crap that you're trying to put into it. And yeah, sort of the successes and failures and why Kanban works. And I think for, one of them has not been around manufacturing much. And so then we created a few defects, which were kind of hilarious, where I made some jackets that I got from Costco with our logo, and we made a couple, and then we were sort of wearing them, being like, oh, this is cool. And then I went to try to zip it up, and my zipper was melted
Oh no.
because we put it in a heat press. And we had done a full test of each one, so I think we had made 2 jackets at that point. But it was a great example of rejects being a real wrench in the works for sort of a command and control style system, because you either need to quantify your anticipated reject rate at every step,
Yeah.
or and I should say, when you have a reject, report it back to the system as having created that, so it can still reduce your inventories of all your precursor goods appropriately. And most companies just don't. And so I shouldn't say most. Many companies that we've interacted with don't. So anyway, that was a really helpful exercise to just demonstrate why it's helpful, why it works. And then I'll just lump another one in here. Very quickly, just bumping into the frustration of trying to figure out what the items were we were trying to get into the system. And Denny was having trouble finding the thing. And so Miguel went and got a barcode scanner, and then used a service, I think it was called like UPC lookup or something like that. And you can scan it, and it pulls up the exact specs, including weights and dimensions of the item. And then also offers a few different vendors and shows the unit pricing. So I think it could be a really nice way to enter faster data, but it was really just reinforced to the, go to the Gemba.
Yeah.
Even if it seems basic, I was feeling a little weird about asking these like very accomplished programmers who have worked on like very cool, big, difficult problems to come like enter t-shirt data into our product,
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, no, there's just no replacing getting on the shop floor.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. We're kind of up on time, so I might just like kind of run through a few of these real quick.
Yep.
They're all relating to our SOPs tab. I'm starting to call it a knowledge base, because it's much more than just SOPs. So we added a QMS section in our knowledge base. So the sections are just divided by drop downs. So like you're like, this is for this, and then it auto groups it. So we added a QMS section, so we can start to put QMS related things there as we work on that process. I added an SOP for setting ID micrometers, because we just bought a set that have replaceable heads. And so
Yep.
every time you swap a head, you have to recalibrate it. And then we had a job that required UNJ threads, which we'd never come
Hmm.
across before, and tracking down some of that information was a little more challenging than we expected. So once we did finally get it, we uploaded that to our CAM. We have a whole CAM reference section, so when
That's
you're
awesome.
programming. And then we got some PFG stones, so precision flat ground
Mm-hmm.
stones for tuning up machine tables and fixtures and whatnot.
Awesome.
And they have a whole like use and care section on their website, so we added an SOP that links to their website for
Very
that.
cool. Well, I'll rip through a few as well. Set up a podcast studio at home, which you can see here,
Nice.
with some sound baffling, etc. Um, Onboarded someone to help with social media for
Oh wow,
Austere.
that's
And
a big deal.
so, what's that?
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Speaking of that's why I kind of rang a bell when you were mentioning the E-Myth and all the roles you have. So I'm going on paternity leave, which we'll discuss how that will relate to the podcast soon. And that's been a real forcing function. I think in the past I've not been great at delegating.
Yeah,
And every time I get really, really busy, I basically find ways to delay items that I just can't get to that are less important. And it's always a forcing function for what's the most impactful, but it's not a forcing function for like systemize it and get it off your plate.
yeah, yeah.
And so this is just like, well, you gotta do it. And so that's been really helpful. So yeah, onboarded someone to do that. Yeah, just kind of trying to systemize and really describe all the things I'm doing and figuring out, can I document it? Can I cancel it? Can I offload it? You know, one of those
Yeah,
or all of those. Well,
yeah.
I'm not going to cancel it and
Some are
offload
all.
it. Yeah. Um, Added a Google Meet link to all of our Calendly events. Most of them had it. Every now and then, someone would use a link that I guess didn't have it built
Hmm.
in, and so the calendar invite would not include a link to the meeting, and so that often resulted in sort of last minute, hey, I don't know where we're having this meeting. There's nothing listed.
Interesting.
And I've gone and like sent people links like between 5 and 10 times, and finally I was like, let's cut this off at the pass and figure out which one. We just have a bunch of different ones in Calendly, and so it took a while to kind of click through them all and make sure they all had it.
Uh,
Added lighting in the shop. That was very nice. New receiving area for the Kanban. So Sam basically broke it all out by vendor, which has been really nice.
hmm.
And then also getting more visibility into where in the process parts are and which parts for anodize. So we send out multiple orders to anodize in the
Yeah,
time, like at any given time, we have multiple orders that are out somewhere between us
sure.
and the anodizer, right?
Yep.
So just to get sort of batch tracking on those visually, especially when we get these big orders that come in and it's kind of like, okay, how much do we have in the process right now? So
Yeah.
this is a huge one, actually. Added a toggle press instead of a rack and pinion press at our assembly station.
Mm.
And so now it's a standardized shut height on the press
Oh,
and just 3D printed tooling underneath to take up the variable height for our different buckle styles. And so built that, and then built this little shuttle with detents that lets you switch between buckle styles.
and toggle press, it just has a fixed stroke. Is that the difference,
Yeah,
basically?
yeah, yeah. And then it's basically an over center mechanism. And so
Mm.
you also get higher force as you approach the bottom,
Oh,
which in
interesting.
our case is perfect. In some cases gives you too little force up top.
Sure.
But yeah, so fixed shut height. And that has created a lot of, this really hammers home the set don't adjust principle from Shigeo Shingo.
Yeah.
I asked Sam over the past few days how it's been, and one of the unexpected benefits, which is super cool, is he was like, well, I know like if we get a reject that something in the machining changed, whereas before I didn't know if I had sort of pressed it too far
Hmm.
or not enough. And so now that's standardized, and so now it sort of highlights other issues if we have them.
Oh, that's cool.
Built out an office, so actually hired people to build out the office.
Ooh la la.
I know,
Look
and they
at
did
you.
such a good job. Almost like they're professionals. Yeah, way better. Updated all the Kanban loops for anodized, so we've been running into problems with those longer lead times. And really, the quote from last week keeps popping up in my head of "Don't break the rules, change the rules,"
Hmm.
because it's like, well, this is our new guess for our numbers and how many Kanbans we have in the loop. And if that doesn't work, we'll change it, but let's establish that and stick to it rather
Yeah.
than, just kind of run that experiment. This is a great one Sam made. So with anodizing, there's been a lot of new stuff to figure out. That anodizer likes a PO per process that they're going to run for us.
Yeah.
And so we basically set them, I think I described this, but set each process up in Arda as a separate vendor so that it automatically will generate a PO for just that process, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Sort
Uh-huh.
of a hack, but it works. And then it'll also tally the dollar value so we can hit the minimums easily without kind of going through and
Oh,
counting it up.
yeah.
So that's been helpful. But then Sam 3D printed these boxes. So before we were taking the parts, loading them into bins, and then when we had to pick them, they'd come out of the bins and go into a box. So instead, he's just building the box, cardboard box that will ship to them, setting it on the shelf, and then hooking a bin he printed on the side of the box that indicates what process it's for. And so then all the Kanbans get thrown in there, and then when we've hit our minimum, you can pack up the box, take those Kanbans, and those get aggregated into an order, which goes on that new Kanban receiving.
I think I followed that. Sounds cool.
Yeah, I'll post photos of it. And then lastly, new point of sale hang tags. We got a big wholesale order, and I just got really tired
Oh,
of shipping people stuff in little plastic bags to hang. That really obscured the buckle, which is sort of the main attraction of what we do. And so just kind of designed a new one. It's going to be 3D printed for the time being. It's not the best process, but we can do it in-house. And while we're iterating, it's really nice.
yeah.
We can get lettering on it without doing manual labor. One fun little detail on that, which is really obvious in retrospect, but yeah, just really landed for me, is like getting the balance right on a hang tag is really
Oh,
important.
yeah.
So it doesn't hang sideways, like slightly at an angle, and also
Yeah,
doesn't like lean forward or back.
I haven't thought about that, but yeah, that's
It,
a really easy way to make your stuff just look absolutely dorky.
really dumb. And I was trying to standardize our hang tags between our 1 inch and our 3/4 inch product, and also if we have variation in the strap length or someone wants whatever.
Uh-huh.
Lots of things to get dialed. And while I accounted for the difference in weight of the buckle, a 1 inch strap is about 33%
Oh,
heavier than a 3/4 inch strap. And so I had to sort of redesign so that it was hanging on the center line in both axes.
yeah.
And that I think we're at a good spot. And we've moved to a design that can be fully printed and die cut.
Oh, cool.
So down the road, if we want to hit those volumes, we can.
Yeah. Cool. Little devil in the details.
Yeah, yeah,
Every single time.
indeed. So anyway, probably a good place to wrap up.
Yes, indeed. Thanks
Thanks all.
everybody for listening.
Yep.
You can find me at likenprecision.com, lichen_MFG on Instagram. You can find the pod at incrementalci on Instagram, and we have a Patreon.
Check it out. And you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com. You can find Arda at arda.cards on Instagram and www.arda.cards. It is a top-level domain on the internet. We're about to launch a new website finally,
Ooh la
so
la.
go check it out.
Yeah, right on. We will see you next week.